Hello, my name is Wallace Bowie III, and I am an African American Studies major here at U of M Dearborn. This is the historical interactive story map that I created called More Than Sunday: Social Service in Detroit's Black Churches. Before I start explaining what this map is about, I would like to begin by sharing a powerful quote from one of my inspirations, Detroit's official historian and a University of Michigan professor, Jermon Jordan. And so this quote perfectly frames the focus of this project. He says, there is no way to accurately discuss Detroit's Black history, especially as it regards the Black freedom struggle, without a deep dive into the faith institutions in Detroit's Black community. The African American Church is the most vital, powerful, and enduring Black institution in America. It's the epicenter and lifeline of the Black community and was almost literally all that we had. And so this map, it shows how African American congregations in Detroit have helped their communities beyond worship services, beyond Bible studies, and beyond prayer meetings, and beyond meeting their spiritual needs. It contains research that I have done for years through some books, some dissertations, newspapers, clippings, church histories, rare photos, anniversary booklets, and oral histories. This map will cover the social service initiatives of 9 of Detroit's most prominent Black churches: the historic Second Baptist Church, Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church, Hartford Memorial Baptist Church, Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church, the historic King Solomon Missionary Baptist Church, Cathedral of Faith Church, the historic New Bethel Baptist Church, the historic Little Rock Missionary Baptist Church, and the Shrine of the Black Madonna. When talking about Black church history in Detroit, I would be remiss not to mention the historic Second Baptist Church. So this congregation was founded by 13 Black individuals in the year of 1836. It's the oldest Black church in the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan. Before Michigan even became a state, Second Baptist Church was already there. Matter of fact, Second Baptist is one of the oldest Black churches in the Midwest. And so the reason Second Baptist was established was because of discrimination that was happening at First Baptist Church of Detroit, which is the mother church of Second Baptist. At First Baptist Church, Black congregants, they weren't allowed to have any leadership roles. And so this splinter group of ex-First Baptist members, they also wanted to have a place to plan anti-slavery movements and hide underground freedom activities. And so these are really the main reasons that caused a church split at First Baptist and the establishing of Second Baptist. And so much history has taken place in the 189-year history of this church. It became a vital center for abolition. It hosted Underground Railroad activities, like I mentioned earlier, and that freed over 5,000 enslaved people. And Second Baptist was one of the last stops on the Underground Railroad, and it was called the Trojan Street station. And Second Baptist also founded the first school for Black children in Detroit. John Brown, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, and Martin Luther King Jr. have spoken at Second Baptist. However, I want to focus more specifically on what social service initiatives the church accomplished under the leadership of its 19th pastor, the Reverend Robert Bradby. He served from the years 1910 to 1946. And so during the Great Migration, committees from Second Baptist Church, they would meet the Southern newcomers at the Michigan Central train station, and they would just welcome them. It would be different committees who were appointed to meet different trains. They would offer assistance in the name of the church. If these Southern migrants didn't have a place to sleep, they would let them sleep on the pews of Second Baptist at night. They would also help them get food and jobs, which I will talk about in a minute. And also during the Great Migration, there were many white and even native Black Detroiters that often kind of looked down on Southern newcomers who were unfamiliar with the local social norms. And so Second Baptist, they helped these migrants adapt by creating over 35 ministries that focus on employment, hygiene, attire, cooking, and education. Now, of course, we can't forget about the Black women who are the backbone of the Black church. The women at Second Baptist supported Reverend Bradby's vision by founding initiatives like the Big Sisters Auxiliary, which created a settlement house for Black women migrants during the Great Migration. They also established the Detroit Study Club, which was created to promote Black women's social advancement. Now I want to circle back to Second Baptist helping Black migrants get jobs. Reverend Bradby had a close relationship with Henry Ford. So he was able to secure jobs for Black migrants at Ford Motor Company for nearly 3 decades. He wrote letters of recommendations, which basically led to guaranteed employment. And this boosted Second Baptist membership and also established the church as an informal job hub for Black migrants. In 1940, the Second Baptist Church Credit Union was organized. Here is the family tree of Second Baptist, right here. Over 30 churches have come out of Second, including some in Canada, and 3 of the Detroit ones are on this map. And moving on to an extension of Second Baptist Church is the Baptist Christian Center. And so education has long been a marker of social status. Second Baptist advanced class and respectability for Black migrants through initiatives like the Baptist Christian Center. It was founded by Reverend Bradby and it was later renamed the Henry C. Gleiss Memorial Center. It offered courses in athletics, Bible and theology, the care of homes, babies, and personal hygiene class, and health and home nursing, and elementary handicraft. And so here's a Sanborn map of where the school once stood. And here are some pictures of the students in the classes of the Baptist Christian Center. Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church. So this is the second oldest Black church in the city of Detroit. It was founded in 1839 and was first called the Colored Methodist Society. And so this group, they supported the Underground Railroad, but this group also later joined the African Methodist Episcopal, so just AME for short, denomination in 1841. So that is when they officially became Bethel AME Church. And so they moved to several locations as the church grew. But in 1925, Bethel completed a new church that was at Frederick and St. Antoine, one of Michigan's largest black built structures at the time. But unfortunately, decades later, the city had created plans for a boulevard that would cut right through this massive sanctuary that they built. And this led to the demolition of the 1925 edifice. In Bethel, they chose to stay in the community despite urban renewal, and they built this $1.5 million church that you see on the screen right here that seats around 1,700 fewer people than their previous edifice. But it's on the Warren Boulevard, and this is where they currently worship today. The boulevard that Detroit had planned to build through the right that would cut right through their previous building never happened. But I want to bring your attention to another quote. This one is by Carter G. Woodson that says, most movements among the Negroes, moreover, have owed their success to the leadership of Negroes prominent in the church. And I think Bethel beautifully displays this. Under the leadership of one of Bethel's most renowned pastor, the Reverend William H. Peck, he and his wife Fanny launched key initiatives in 1930 to support the black community during the Great Depression. And so Reverend Peck, he founded the Booker T. Washington Trade Association, and it's now called the Booker T. Washington Business Association, to aid black businesses. And Mrs. Peck, she established the Housewives League of Detroit to encourage black patronage. And Bethel also established its own insurance company, Bethel Benefit, to address the economic challenges that were faced by black Detroiters during the Great Depression. I think it was a souvenir booklet from Bethel's 100th anniversary, yes, that reflected on the hardships that black people had to endure in the city in 1934. It was particularly harsh for the black community in Detroit. Unemployment was widespread. Many people had lost their homes. And in response, Bethel opened its doors to distribute government-provided food and served as a vital resource for medicine, fuel, and other necessities. And so, recognizing the need for a long-term support, Bethel's leaders created the insurance company to improve members' economic stability. And so, for just an enrollment fee of 50 cents and a monthly premium of 25 cents, Bethel Benefit offered up to 6 weeks of illness benefits at $3 per week, along with a $75 death benefit. Bethel also had the first black state chartered credit union in the United States. It was called the Fannie B. Peck Credit Union. It was dissolved in November of 2015. Bethel also met the recreational needs of the community. Bethel had their own basketball team. And so here's a picture of Bethel that I took in June of 2022. And right here is a picture, a group photo of the Fannie B. Peck Credit Union. And if you look really closely, you can see that underneath this photo, there's a caption that says Berry Gordy Jr., who was the founder of Motown Records. And also it says Esther Gordy, and that is the sister of Berry Gordy, and she founded the Motown Museum. And so the Gordy family, they all went to Bethel AME. So referring back to the conversation of Bethel AME and urban renewal, Detroit had a housing shortage, and so this was driven by the freeway construction and suburban migration. And this caused the Medical Center Citizens District Council to sell Bethel AME 5.5 acres of urban renewal land. And so with a $400,000 HUD loan, Bethel's nonprofit housing corporation built Bethel Towers and townhouses. It was a 120 unit apartment building and they had about 26 townhouses. And so here are some of the pictures I took of Bethel's housing from 2022 and 2023. And they are now the St. Antoine Gardens. Oh, and also here is the previous beautiful building of Bethel AME that I have been talking about. And this is where Bethel Benefit Association, the insurance company, the Booker T. Washington Business Association, the Housewives League of Detroit, and the Fannie B. Peck Credit Union were founded and originally housed. And so this is an original photograph of this building that I own, and it comes from a Detroit News article. And here are some pictures actually of the remains of Bethel AME's previous building. And I took this picture in August of 2023. As I mentioned before, the boulevard that Detroit had planned to build through their sanctuary never got built. So eventually, this land was sold to a black developer. And during site excavation, the construction crew discovered that there were still surviving sections of brick walls and basement flooring from this former church building. So the black developer, he stopped everything and he held an event to recognize and commemorate the history that happened within the walls of this edifice. So I went to this event. I walked in the processional that they had from their current site to their past site. It took about 2 to 4 minutes to walk over there. Where they used to be is not far at all from where they are now. And so this was Bethel's third building. And like my description says, in 2025, it would be a 100-year-old facility, would have been a 100-year-old facility. So this is Hartford Memorial Baptist Church. It was founded on May 27th, 1917. This was the first black church on Detroit's west side, and it was created to accommodate the black newcomers who were settling in what we know now as the Old West Side of Detroit. All five of the founders and organizers were members in good standing of Second Baptist Church, and three of these were women, and they were all related. So it was a mother, daughter, and a granddaughter. Therefore, Hartford's mother church is Second Baptist. Now, Hartford was originally called Institutional Baptist Church. Reverend Edgar Wendell Edwards was the founding pastor, and after he left, Reverend Charles Hill took over, and this is when he renamed it Hartford Avenue Baptist Church. Reverend Hill became Hartford's longest serving pastor, and he was a former associate pastor at Second Baptist. And Reverend Hill, he was a bold advocate for workers' rights, and he supported unions despite its controversy. And in the 1930s, he helped unionize Dodge, Chrysler, and Packard plants. And he also played a key role in unionizing Ford Motor Company. And so Hartford also played a key role in advocating for Black families during the Sojourner Truth Housing Project battles that were happening in the 1940s. And so Reverend Charles G. Adams became Hartford's pastor in 1969, and he relocated the church to its current site in 1977. This was also when he changed the name from Hartford Avenue to Hartford Memorial Baptist Church. And so, under his leadership, Hartford established a credit union. This was in 1979, and it had assets of over 2.5 million. And in 1982, the Hartford Agape House was created to serve the Metro Detroit residents. It offered support such as food assistance, clothing, medical care. It was legal referrals, senior services, educational programs, vocational training, you name it. Its many initiatives included the Hunger Task Force. There was a bookstore. There was a free medical clinic. There was the food co-op. There was a Hartford Senior Center. There was an auto school and shop. There was a scholarship and preparation programs, and so much more. Hartford also had a strong athletic ministry. There were baseball, basketball, golf, softball, and cheerleading teams. And so just recently in 2017, Hartford Village Commons, which is a partnership with the Presbyterian Villages, was established. This is an 84-unit gated community for seniors 62 and older. Dr. Charles G. Adams sadly passed away in November of 2023. And so next is the land that is owned by Hartford Memorial. And so in the 1980s and the 1990s, Hartford had raised $500,000 to acquire and develop land along the 7 Mile and James Cousin Freeway. The property was leased to businesses like Super Kmart, Home Depot, and Black-owned franchises, including McDonald's and KFC, just to help revitalize the neighborhood. And other tenants included Total Arms Security, Steve's Soul Food, Subway, and Checkers. And so in 1998, Hartford leased its property to Super Kmart. And so this was Detroit's first major department store since the 1970s. And it also became the nation's top performing Kmart before it closed down due to bankruptcy. And in 2003, the site was leased to Home Depot, as you can see, and it brought 600 jobs and a lot of tax revenue to the city of Detroit. And so here are some Google Street View screenshots that I took of these companies. Here's the Home Depot, which was formerly a Super Kmart. Let me scoot this up so you can see it better. Here is the Kentucky Fried Chicken, the KFC, the McDonald's, the Subway, the Checkers. And right here is the former Hartford Memorial Building, and it now belongs to New Ebenezer Baptist Church. I believe I took this photo in August of 2022, and here is the interior of the former Hartford Memorial Building that I took in 2024 of September. Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church began on November 15th, 1920, when families from Cordele, Georgia gathered at a Detroit home. They wanted to form this church on the east side of Detroit. And so Reverend Major James Morris was the founder. And so in 1921, some former dissatisfied Hartford Avenue Baptist Church members, the church that we just previously talked about, they joined Tabernacle's East Side congregation, and they offered to build a church on Detroit's West Side. So together they established Tabernacle Baptist Church in the new West Side location. And so after the passing of Reverend Majors in June of 1926, later that year, Reverend Robert H. Pittman became the second pastor and guided the church through the Great Depression. And so he relocated the church to 6125 Beechwood, and he served until his death in August of 1946. And so in 1947, Reverend Dr. Jesse J. McNeil was called as the third pastor, and he grew the membership to over 1,000. He added the neighborhood house, community center, and the Pittman Chapel to this Beechwood facility, previous edifice. He stepped down in 1961. Reverend Fulton O'Bradley became the fourth pastor in 1962. and he did some sanctuary improvements. He expanded the Christian education ministry, and he also got the church a nursery school bus. He resigned in 1971 to pursue a career in teaching. Dr. Frederick G. Sampson II began his ministry in 1971, and he created impactful programs like the Tabernacle Annex Soup Kitchen and the Meals on Wheels program. And so he served until his passing in 2001. And in 2004, Reverend Nathan Johnson was elected as the sixth pastor and continues to lead Tabernacle today. And so going back, in April 1952, Dr. Jesse J. McNeil and his wife, they launched the Tabernacle Neighborhood House Nursery to meet the community's needs for early childhood education. And so this was located in the neighborhood house of the previous facility. And so the nursery, it required an interview for parents and health checks for children. It was renamed the Tabernacle Child Development Center in the 1980s due to the high demand. In 1969, Reverend Fulton O. Bradley established a scholarship committee to support youth with financial barriers to higher education and to also provide career guidance. And I'm proud to be a recipient of the 2024 Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church Scholarship. And so Tabernacle's recreational programs, they began under Reverend Robert Pittman and expanded under Dr. Sampson. And so this included basketball, bowling, tennis, skating, and women's softball teams. The church also offered a Meals on Wheels ministry, a job placement program, and a counseling center. And so down below, here is the old tabernacle edifice that I have been talking about. And this is on the old west side of Detroit. And it's actually right by the old edifice of Hartford Memorial. And so this is where the Tabernacle Child Development Center, the Meals on Wheels ministry, the job placement program, the recreational ministries, and the counseling center. This is where they were all founded and housed originally. And so now we're moving on to King Solomon Missionary Baptist Church. King Solomon was founded on May 16th, 1926, by Reverend Moses Williams. And he was the previous pastor of St. James Missionary Baptist Church, which is also a very historic congregation. And so King Solomon's first locations was in Detroit's Black Bottom. The congregation, they grew after merging with another church called Mount Nebo Baptist Church. And so despite several relocations, the church found its permanent home at 9244 Delmar Street in 1941. And so after the death of Reverend Moses in 1931, six pastors led the church until Reverend Dr. Theodore Sylvester Bone became the seventh pastor on March 13th, 1944. And so it was under his leadership the church experienced the most significant growth. And so in 1951, Reverend Bone moved King Solomon Baptist Church to its current location at 6100 and 6125 14th Street. And they purchased this property from Temple Baptist Church for $353,000. And so this is an equivalent to about $4.2 million in today's money. It was the largest venue owned by Black people at the time. And with its 5,000 seat auditorium, King Solomon became a key civil rights venue. In 1954, Thurgood Marshall spoke there after the Brown versus Board of Education victory. In October of 1955, King Solomon hosted a 24-hour rally. It was called Operation Justice. And the goal of it was to protest the killing of Emmett Till. Mamie Till and her father spoke at this rally. And the church raised $400, so about $4,700 in today's money, to support Mamie Till's efforts to share her son's story. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he spoke at King Solomon twice, once in 1958 and another in 1963, a week after giving his I Have a Dream speech. In 1964, Malcolm X delivered his Ballad or the Bullet speech here. And King Solomon has a rich musical legacy. Reverend James Cleveland performed with his singers here in 1965. And in 1971, Duke Ellington, he held a sacred music jazz concert. And in 1968, the Gospel Music Workshop of America was founded at King Solomon, and it brought over 3,000 people. And also, Berry Gordy discovered the Supremes here. King Solomon has had its own credit union and a dry cleaners. This was according to the current pastor, oral history he was giving, the current pastor, Reverend Charles E. Williams II. And so here is the recreation and educational building of King Solomon. It's across the street from the auditorium that we just saw. It's in the process now of being restored. And an article published in the Detroit Tribune highlighted the many amenities of this building. It was then called the Education and Community Activity Center. It said that it had the pastor's library, three conference rooms, 75 classrooms, five ladies' lounges, two dining rooms, two men's lounges, two kitchens, a gymnasium, a boxing gym, and a chapel. And this was also known later as the 14th Marquette Community Center. It opened in 1954 and it offered programs for all races, including music, art, dramatics, and citizenship classes. It also had a medical clinic, a day nursery, and hosted events like table tennis, roller skating, and Halloween parties. And so King Solomon's recreational program thrived with the gym that was in the basement. Boxer Thomas Hearns, he trained in this basement. And the church produced Olympic medalists, Ronnie Harris, and many others. King Solomon also had 10 finalists in the Golden Gloves, with seven winning. In the 1960s, poet Margaret Danner founded the Bone House. This was a cultural center that attracted poets like Langston Hughes. It offered courses in dance, French, college prep, and poetry. This was in response to Detroit school cutbacks. And so, right here is King Solomon's previous building, which is on Delmar Street, as I mentioned earlier. It is now the Pentecostal Christian Academy of the Pentecostal Church of God congregation. When King Solomon owned this facility, it had what was called a business corner. This was attached to their building, I believe, on the left side. It housed six stores that exemplified the church's support for Black patronage. And so here is a picture of King Solomon's former building when they owned it. And here is the business corner that I was talking about. Here is King Solomon's old settlement house. King Solomon, like Second Baptist Church, operated a settlement house. This was on West Grand Boulevard, and a Detroit Tribune article mentions that it featured a dormitory, a dining hall, chapel, club rooms, and some offices. And here is the article. This is the Cathedral of Faith. It originates in the city of Inkster, Michigan. It was initially called Peace and Harmony Baptist Church in 1930. Reverend A.J. Oliver was the founding pastor. And after Reverend Oliver's 11-month tenure, Reverend William Wooten led the congregation until 1932. And this was followed by Reverend O.B. Jones, who renamed it Second Baptist Church. In 1948, under his pastorate, the church purchased two lots for a larger building. Now, at first, a massive wooden structure was built, but was unfortunately destroyed by fire in 1953. Then Reverend Jones oversaw the construction of a new brick auditorium at 3209 William Street, which is now abandoned. Leadership passed to Reverend Charles Poole and then Reverend S.L. Hampton. And then in 1969, Reverend Dr. Jackson Herbert Hinkle became pastor. Now, he played a role in the historic Little Rock school desegregation case, and he also contributed to the founding of Operation Breadbasket in Chicago alongside Reverend Jesse Jackson. And so the church history calls him a modern day Moses. He renamed the church Second Baptist Church of the Bible. Then he changed it to Baptist Temple of Inkster. And finally, in 1973, he renamed it the Cathedral of Faith, transitioning it to a non-denominational congregation. And so when Reverend Dr. Hinkle became pastor, the congregation outgrew their William Street auditorium, and they purchased 9.5 acres of land at 2727 Inkster Road and Michigan Avenue. And so this site became Cathedral City, and it had an elegant sanctuary that the church's history describes as a replica of a biblically described temple. And so several additional buildings, both on this Cathedral City site and elsewhere, were constructed to support Dr. Hinkle's visionary womb to tomb program. This womb to tomb initiative included the Cathedral Academy Daycare, elementary and secondary schools, the Herbert Hinkle Bible Institute, and a funeral home that was owned by the church and was next to the sanctuary. The church also co-owned the Metropolitan Memorial Cemetery in Belleville, Michigan. And so Cathedral City's expansive plans also included the J. Earl Williams Educational and Recreational Center, which was to feature a pool, a gym, a bowling alley, and classrooms, although it was never completed. Other ministries at Cathedral of Faith ranged from family counseling, a library, bookstore, a co-op, to a Christian dating service, a drug rehabilitation program, the Operation Breadbasket, and the Love and Care program that offered food accounts in Inkster's Black-owned Allen's supermarket. The church provided helicopter rides for children, and it operated a transportation system with 15 buses that surpassed Inkster's transportation system. It brought members from Detroit, Willow Run, Ypsilanti, Romulus, and Wayne. And so by 1976, it hosted one of the world's largest black Sunday schools with 3,749 attendants in one Sunday. After the Inkster Sanctuary burnt down in July of 1988, the church relocated on Burnt Road in Detroit, Michigan, and 13925 Burnt Road. And certain elements of the ministries that happened in Inkster continued in Detroit. And Reverend Lee A. Jackson is the current pastor here at Cathedral of Faith now. And so here is some pictures. Here's a picture I own of the exterior of the sanctuary of Cathedral of Faith, Inkster. And here is a picture of the land that it sits on today. It was demolished after the fire that happened. Here is the former Cathedral of Faith funeral parlor, which is now Cannon Suit Store. And here is the uncompleted J. Earl Williams Educational and Recreational Center. So the historic New Bethel Baptist Church was founded on March 6, 1932, in a Detroit home at 2627 Leland Street. It began with prayer meetings, and it was established as the Helping Hand Society. That was the name of it. Then the name New Bethel Baptist Church was proposed by someone named J.H. Henderson. And early leadership included W. Bell, Benjamin McFall, and F.J. Brown, with Reverend Robert Tate overseeing these services. And the church grew quickly when it merged with another congregation called Israel Baptist Church. And they called Reverend V.L. Bolton as its first pastor in April 1932, followed by Reverend H.H. Coleman and Reverend N.H. Armstrong and Reverend William E. Ramsey. In 1946, the renowned Reverend C.L. Franklin, this is the father of Aretha Franklin, became the pastor. And so he relocated the church to its current site that you see right here after being displaced from Black Bottom due to freeway construction. The $500,000 renovation of a former theater this was, and the renovation transformed it into a worship center. And so while in Black Bottom, the church, they provided food, clothing, and scholarships to the community. And so New Bethel, they also played a pivotal role in the historic March on Freedom that was down Woodward Avenue, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke. And this was the largest civil rights march in Michigan's history. And so after Reverend Franklin's passing in 1984, Reverend Robert Smith Jr. became pastor, and he remains so today. In 1983, the church opened two federally supported emergency relief centers, assisting over 400 people weekly. And they also introduced what was called Bank Day, and this was to promote Black-owned businesses. And the church further supported its community through initiatives like after-school programs, adult computer classes, and they also hosted landlord-tenant meetings in collaboration with the Linwood Community Organization. They also had a mini mall and a country kitchen. And so these right here are New Bethel's Rehoboth Plaza apartments. They are located across the street from the sanctuary. It was a 31-unit complex. Reverend Smith founded the New Bethel Redeemer Development Corporation to enhance affordable housing in the Linwood community. And renovating these apartments was one of their projects. This is the Little Rock Baptist Church that is on Woodward Avenue. It was founded in April of 1936 under Reverend Robert E. Tate. It started with 6 members in a Detroit home on East Willis Street. The church expanded steadily and it relocated several times. After Reverend Tate's passing in 1953, leadership was transitioned through multiple pastors until Reverend Jim Holley assumed the role in June of 1972. And so, under his leadership, the church thrived. It moved into this iconic neo-Gothic building that you see right here on Woodward Avenue. Reverend Holley established Country Preacher Foods. It was a minority-owned food distributor whose profits funded scholarships and shelters and clothing programs of the church. And Country Preacher partnered with Better Made and Rite Aid and 7-Eleven and even Northwest Airlines. They provided 17,000 cookies daily to Northwest Airlines. And Little Rock sponsored youth trips to historical landmarks and HBCUs. Little Rock also opened the Detroit Academy of Arts and Sciences, DAAS for short, a charter school with 2 campuses. The Jefferson campus remains open and it's authorized by Oakland University. Little Rock also had an Education in the Hood program where adults could earn associate degrees on site via Wayne County Community College. The church launched initiatives like the Shoes for Children Project, which provided thousands of shoes annually, and the Little Rock Food Pantry, which distributes food year round. Little Rock also had plenty of other programs that supported the economic growth, job training, and health services such as the Little Rock Pharmacy, the Little Rock Health Care Home, and Little Rock New Home Developments. Adjacent to the church is the Considine Little Rock Family Life Center, and this was leased from the city of Detroit in 2006. And it serves as North End's only recreation center. And so it offers basketball, swimming, after-school programs, and community meeting spaces. And they partner with Forgotten Harvest and Gleaners, and they provide food distribution, serving up to 500 families bi-weekly. And Reverend Holley, he retired in 2022 after 50 years of leadership. Reverend Antoine T. Colvin is now the senior pastor. Um, Moving on to the Shrine of the Black Madonna. Shrine number one. You can trace his origins back to 1951 when Dr. Albert Clegg Sr., his brother Henry Clegg, and others founded St. Mark's Presbyterian Church on 12th and Atkinson. Reverend Albert Clegg Jr. became pastor, but he was dismissed 2 years later due to his activism. And so he and many members, including Dr. Clegg Sr., they left to establish Central Congregational Church, and it was later renamed the Shrine of the Black Madonna in 1970. And so there are also shrines that were located on Mack and Burns in Detroit, Wyoming, at 7 Mile, and in Atlanta, Georgia, and Houston, Texas. And so the shrine had the Shrine Law Center that was at 18934 Wyoming, and it offered legal aid and seminars to support the disadvantaged communities. And so also under Reverend Clegg's leadership, the Shrine Cultural Center and Bookstore were established. There's branches of it in Atlanta and in Houston. And so these stores, they sold African art and clothes and books and much more while hosting cultural events. And so Reverend Clegg, he had a vision for Beulah Land Farm in South Carolina to be a self-sustaining sanctuary for Black people. In 1999, the Shrine of the Black Madonna acquired nearly 4,000 acres of land, making it one of the largest Black-owned and Black church-owned rural properties in the U.S. And so I have reached the end of my map. Hopefully, it showed you the powerful impact of Detroit's Black churches and how they were more than just places of worship. They were centers for education. It was centers for economic growth, social services, and community support. These churches helped children get an education. They supported Black businesses, and they fought for justice. Okay, and the history and legacy of these 9 Black churches are deeply tied to the stories of Black Detroiters, and they are ones worth remembering and celebrating. And so, thank you so much for listening to my presentation. Have a wonderful day.